Welcome to Phoenix English classes. Once again, we are going to start with class 12 CBSE board, the first book Flamingo. And today we are going to start the very first chapter in prose section. This first chapter which we are going to start is entitled as The Last Lesson. It is written by Alphonse Daudet. He was a French novelist and a short storyteller. And for this story, he has selected a historical background of Franco-Prussian War. And this war was fought under the leadership of Bismarck. France had to lose its two big terrains. One was the Alsace and the other was Lorrain. And the whole setup of this story is the part of Alsace, where we see in a school a student who is not very willing to study, as all the students are, and his special liking was to be in the lap of nature, as it is the basic instinct of the human beings. There was no such problem that he was a nature lover, but there is a problem that he dislikes studies, and in studies also his special dislike for the language, especially about the study of his mother tongue, his native language, that was French. And the story starts on such a day when this central character, the boy whose name is Franz, he is on his way to school, but all the time he is thinking about not going to school. He wants to go towards the forest where he can enjoy himself in the lap of nature. He was allured by the twittering birds, by the voices of the sawmill, by the playful, artful movements of the squirrels. Yet, ultimately he decided that although he was late, he would go to the school. And today his decision of going to school was not a simple one, because he knows that his teacher, Monsieur Hamel, will be very angry with him. The first thing was that he was late, and the second reason was that he had already told all the students that he would listen the lesson on participles from all the students. This is the general nature of the students. Whenever there is a test, there is a questionnaire, there is a kind of assessment going on in the school, they never want to go there. But because they are compelled, they are forced, they go there to face all these things. But Franz is especially unwilling because he does not know even the first letter of participle that was going to be asked in the class that day. This is the starting of the story, and this story starts with the central character Franz, who is a very small boy. He is a school going boy, and he is very much upset, he is very much afraid because his teacher, Monsieur Hamel, would listen the participles, and he did not know anything about it. Here the story starts with the fear of the boy who is not willing to take any lesson in his mother tongue, in his own language, in his own native language. That is the key part of this lesson. On the way he looks at many things, but one thing that has especially casted his attention was the bulletin board at the town hall. On his way to school, he notices that there is some news on the bulletin board of the town hall, and people were assembled there. They were reading what is written on that notice board. Franz knew it very well that if there is a news, it cannot be a good news, because all the bad news have come to the people of Alsace for last few days, and if there is gathering once again, it would be certainly some bad news. Thinking this, because the news could not be good, he moves on that sooner or later he would come to know what that bad news was, and he hurried towards his school. This is the first part of this lesson. Thinking all these things, what could be that bad news on the bulletin board of the town hall? He hurried towards the school. He knew that as soon as he would enter the school premises, if somehow he could not conceal himself, he could not manage to reach his seat without being noticed, without being found out that he was late, he is sure to be punished. There is a fear in the mind of the child about what was going to happen, yet believing that perhaps, like on many other days he was successful in doing so, he would be able to take the advantage of all the clamor that was the usual thing about the school, and he would reach his seat without being noticed. But as soon as he reached the school, he was stunned to see that there was unusual calm, there was a hushed silence, there was unusual quietness all over the school. There was no clattering, no reciting of the lessons that was the usual practice in the school. There was no noise, neither from the student side nor from the teacher side, who were always very much upset to see such kind of clamor, and that's why they beat the desk with their rulers, and that made another kind of noise. But today all these things were vanished from the atmosphere of the school, and there was a silence. It was unusual, it was very strange. The boy thinks, what possibly can be the reason of such a silence in the school? Whatever be, but the problem was with the Franz, with that boy. The problem was with Franz, the boy who thought that he could take some advantage of the clamor there, of the noises there, and could reach his seat in his class without being noticed. But now he was helpless, because there was hushed silence, and he had to go to his classroom as well as he had to enter and try to find his seat. under the eyes of everybody who were present in the classroom, the students and the teacher, Mr. Hamill. And because he was forced to do it, he was already inside the school and now he had to enter his class. He decided to enter. He was compelled to do it. But what happened there at his entry, that was unusual. He thought that he would be punished. He thought that there will be some kind of anger in the eyes of his teacher. He would at least scold him for being late. Other things were far apart. Yet he would perhaps be scolded. First, that was going to happen, but it did not happen. It was also an unusual thing, the reaction of the teacher. He did not scold the boy, he did not punish the boy. He simply welcomed him in the classroom and asked him to sit on his seat, regretting that he was going to start the lesson without him. But it was good that the boy had ultimately come and he could sit on his seat and take that lesson. This was really a strange reaction. But as soon as the permission was granted, the boy was happy because he was not scolded. He jumped over the desk and sat on his bench. But as soon as he was calm and composed and he was out of the fear that he would be punished, he would be scolded, he noticed what was there in the classroom that was still strange. It was not the usual class. All the students were sitting silently on their places. Mr. Hamill was also present in the class to take that very class, which was unusual. And the two things that were really amazing for the boy, one thing was the attire, was the clothing of Monsieur Hamill. He was in his unusual uniform. It was the uniform he used to wear only on special occasions. And the second, the more striking thing or the more amazing thing in the classroom was that on the back benches that were usually empty, nobody sat there. They were also occupied. And it was not the students who were sitting there, it was the village people, the old gentry of the village, like the retired postmaster, the former mayor, and some other notable people, notable old men of the village were sitting on the back benches. That was the most surprising thing for Franz. And before he could come out of that amazement, the class started. And this was not the usual class in which he thought the participants would be asked from the students and the teacher will tell them what was the right answer, or he will give them a lesson on participles. The teacher announced that you are welcomed to the last lesson of this language which he taught there. That was their native language, French. Their own language was going to be banned in their own native country. That was the effect of slavery or being beaten in the war. The Germans had given an order that after that very day, French would not be taught in any of the schools of Alsace. That was shocking. In place of French, there would be the lessons on German. and soon the German teacher will also arrive there. That was the news which was there at the town hall, the people reading. Now Franz came to know what was the bad news that he would have thought on that very day when he came late. And because it was the last lesson, he was amazed and everything seemed changing. Everything about the language that he thought so far, he never took interest in his language, that was French. And now all of a sudden this language of his had become very dear. As soon as he came to know that there will be no class of French in his own school, he felt that something very dear, something very, very near to his heart was being snatched away. But the time was gone. He could not do anything. The teacher has already announced the thing that there will be no study of French after this last class. And it was a deep regret, not only in the hearts of the students but also in the hearts of all the people who live in that part of the country, including the teacher who had been there and he was teaching there the language French for last 40 years, and now all of a sudden it had come to an end and he was going to teach his last lesson. And now the mystery itself was cleared. Why those village people, why those old people, they were all assembled in that class. That was their humble tribute. That was the last tribute, not only to their class, but to their language and to the old teacher, Monsieur Hamel, who had been teaching them their own language for last 40 years. They were present there to fulfill two purposes. One, to grace the services of Monsieur Hamel, and to grace their own language that had no part in the curriculum from today. That was a really painful thing, and more than painful, it was shameful that you live in such a country and you do not know about your language. Here, Monsieur Hamel gives a very short speech about this language. He praises language as the best language in the world, the best scripting in the world, but it was going to be extinct. It was going towards an end because of the negligence of their people. This conveys a message that the people who do not feel proud of their language and who do not make the fullest effort to continue it with their culture, their language and their culture and even their country becomes spoiled, and they were going to be spoiled. They were going to lose their identity. Language is not a non-living thing, it is living, it is identity-giving thing. Everyone should be very cautious, should be very alert and attentive about the language which is theirs. And French had already done such a great wrong, and that's why they were feeling that painful shame in their hearts. This was the problem of the country, that people, because they do not pay attention towards their language, now they were not able to continue it and to give it to their coming generations. On this point, Monsieur Hamel says that if the boy, the central character, the boy Franz, was unable to say anything about participle, if he is unable to speak even one word about participle, it is shameful not only for the boy but for the parents, for the teachers, for the gentry among which he lived. All were responsible. The real culprit was not that boy, but the real culprits were the parents who did not think about their language, about the neighbors who did not encourage the boy to learn such a good language as theirs, and the teacher himself who did not try his best to teach on every possible occasions he had, but he had given more importance to his personal life. That's why the boy was not able to say anything about participle, and he was not a boy only, but he was the representative of all the coming generations who will not have any knowledge about their own language, and in this way not only language will be extinct, but their culture and their self-respect of being the citizen of France will also be extinct. After that, Monsieur Hamel starts the class. He gives different tasks to all those who were present there. It will not be justified to say all the students, because along with the students there were senior citizens sitting in the place, in the classroom. He was addressing to one and all there, and he was giving his praying his own tribute to the language, but he was doing a great job of composing himself, not being very much emotional, although he knew that this was the last class, and after that he was not going to be able to do anything for his own language. This beginning of the last lesson started with many activities. He gives the task of reading, he gives the task of writing, he gives many lessons on them, many clues, and after that he says that all have to write something. They start writing, but except of the scribbling of the pencil and pen on the papers, there was no other noise, there was no other clamor. Then M. Hamel, Monsieur Hamel, has been described here. What kind of a teacher he was, what kind of a devoted person he was, what a devotion was there in his heart for his language, and how much he was concerned about what was going on there. Really, all that was being done in that classroom was a pathetic endeavor. All were trying in vain, because all their efforts could pay a homage, could pay a tribute to their language, but it was not enough to let it be continued in the next classes. It was to be extinct from the schools. And there was a pathetic end of this last lesson also. Though the teacher tries to compose himself as much as he could, yet at the end of the lesson he could not say this is the end. He starts weeping, and to hide his tears, he looks at the blackboard, and with his hands he signals to all that the class was ended, and here ends this lesson. This was the overall outlining of this chapter that is written in the form of a story. It is inspired by the true historical event of Franco-Prussian War. The message is very clear that we have to pay respect, and more than respect, we have to do everything, every endeavor. We should let no stone unturned to enrich our language. Otherwise, those who do not pay attention to it, who do not pay respect to their language, their respect finds no place in this world. They are bound to become slave of others. If not today, it can be the next day, or not next day, it can be the day after tomorrow, but you are sure to be doomed into the clutches of slavery. But as long as you have that language which is yours, even if you are enslaved, even if you are defeated, even if you are being deprived from freedom, you have the keys and you can free yourselves with the help of that key, which is called language, and it is your native language, it is your mother tongue. This is all about the outlining of the story.